Imagine this for a moment. You're sitting alone, in silence, just you and your thoughts. Everything is still, calm. And then, like a bolt of lightning cutting through a clear sky, a memory crashes into your mind. You didn't ask for it. You didn't go looking for it. But there it is. Maybe it's a betrayal that still burns like fire in your chest. Maybe it's a relationship that left you shattered into pieces. Or maybe it's a mistake. One of those that clings to you like a shadow, chasing your every step, even after all this time. Sound familiar? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could change everything. There's a hidden truth, a powerful secret unearthed from the deepest corners of the human soul by the great psychologist Carl Jung. A truth that doesn't just offer healing for the memories that haunt you, it promises something even greater. Freedom, a liberation from the chains of your past, a way to finally live the life you were always meant to live. And the most incredible part, this power is already inside you. It's been there all along, quietly waiting for you to awaken it. I'm not talking about wishful thinking or fairy tale magic. I'm not offering empty promises wrapped in comforting words. What I'm talking about is real. It's deep, transformative, and it's rooted in Jung's revolutionary understanding of the human mind and soul. So take a deep breath. You're about to embark on an intense, soul-shifting journey. Carl Jung was more than a psychologist. He was a pioneer, a fearless explorer of the unconscious realms of the human psyche. He believed that inside every one of us exists a hidden universe, a realm beneath the surface of our conscious thoughts. This isn't just some vague storage room for random ideas or bizarre dreams. It's much more than that. It's the archive of your entire being. Every joy, every fear, every scar, especially the ones you've tried to bury so deep that you flinch just thinking about them. But here's the key. Jung didn't see pain as something to run from or to lock away and forget. He saw it as a message, a sacred signal from your soul, crying out, "Look at me, there is something here that needs healing." So I ask you, what memory have you been avoiding today? What moment from your past still weighs on your shoulders like a backpack filled with stones? Because today, we're going to start letting go of those stones, one by one, using the tools Jung gave us. Think about it. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you try, there's something that always seems to pull you backward? A whisper in your mind that says, "You're not enough." A cruel voice insisting that you don't deserve love. Or maybe it's the fear that you'll just keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Jung had a name for that voice, for that inner weight dragging you down. He called it the shadow. The shadow is that part of you that you keep hidden. It's the side you try to ignore, the feelings you suppress, the truths you hope no one ever sees. It's your fears, your insecurities. It's every moment of shame, guilt, or pain you've tried to erase from your story. But here's the twist. Jung didn't see the shadow as your enemy. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to teach you. Every time a painful memory surfaces, it's not the universe punishing you. It's your shadow asking, begging you to stop running and finally look it in the eyes, to acknowledge it, to accept it. And what if I told you that by doing just that, you could begin to heal wounds you didn't even realize were still bleeding? Let's pause. Right now. Just take a breath with me. Inhale slowly. Exhale gently. Feel the air moving through you. Let yourself settle into this moment. Now I want you to think of a relationship that hurt you. Maybe someone betrayed you. Maybe someone made you feel small, unworthy. invisible. Maybe they abandoned you when you needed them most. Hold that person in your mind. Jung would tell you that this person wasn't just someone who came into your life to hurt you. They were a mirror. Yes, a mirror reflecting back something hidden deep within you, something you still haven't fully faced. Maybe it's a fear of being rejected. Maybe it's a desperate craving for validation. Or maybe it's an old childhood wound that never had the chance to properly heal. Now just imagine, what could happen if instead of blaming that person, you stopped and asked yourself, what is this showing me about myself? That's where Jung's brilliance shines brightest. He showed us that our pain can become the doorway to deep self-awareness. The very thing that hurts you could be the thing that helps you grow. Don't get me wrong. This isn't about excusing those who hurt you. This isn't about saying, it's okay that they treated me that way. It's not about letting people off the hook. It's about reclaiming your power. Because as long as you carry that pain like a victim, you're still giving your power away to the one who hurt you. But when you face that pain, when you look it in the eye and say, I'm going to understand this. I'm going to heal from this. The power comes back to you. And believe me, there is nothing more liberating than that. Jung understood something that many still struggle to grasp today. He knew that the unconscious mind is not just a hidden corner of our psyche. It is a living, breathing force that communicates with us constantly, not with words or logic, but through symbols, through emotions, through dreams. And yes, even through those painful memories you try so hard to forget. Let's talk about something we've all experienced at some point. Self-love, or perhaps more accurately, the painful absence of it. How many times have you looked at yourself in the mirror and felt like you weren't enough? Like you were somehow falling short of what you should be? How many times have you allowed someone else's opinion, words, or actions to define your worth? Jung would tell you that every time you hand over your value to someone else, you're committing a small betrayal. Not to them, but to yourself. Specifically, to your unconscious self. Because deep within you, beneath the noise of your doubts and the scars of your past, lives a profound truth. You are already enough, exactly as you are. But to access that truth, to truly embody it, you must confront the internal voice that insists otherwise. You must face your shadow. That shadow is not just a metaphor. It's made up of the wounds you carry, the ones you've buried so deeply that you've almost convinced yourself they no longer matter. But they do. That time you were harshly criticized. That moment you were rejected. That failure that convinced you you weren't worthy of trying again. Do any of these ring a bell? Because if they do, I need you to listen carefully. Those memories, as vivid as they may feel, are not absolute truths. They're not your destiny. They are just stories. Stories that your mind has chosen to replay on a loop. But here's the powerful part. You can choose to rewrite them. Imagine this for a moment. You're walking through a dense, dark forest. Fog surrounds you. The path ahead is unclear, and every step feels uncertain. And just as you're about to turn back, a soft voice whispers from within, "Keep going. You're close." That voice, that gentle guidance, is your unconscious. And that forest, that's your past. Jung believed that the unconscious is always trying to communicate with us, to lead us, to guide us toward healing, even when we don't consciously realize it. But in order to hear it clearly, you have to stop running. Stop avoiding the pain. Sit with it. Ask it, what are you trying to teach me? Maybe right now, as I speak, you're thinking of a very specific memory or moment from your past. Don't push it away. Hold on to it. Because in the next few minutes, we're going to go even deeper into Jung's ideas and discover how to use them, not just to understand your pain, but to truly transform it and find peace. So let me ask you a direct question. When was the last time you truly felt like yourself? Not the version of you that others expect, not the mask you wear to survive, but the real, unfiltered, unashamed you. If it's hard to answer, that's okay. You're not alone. Most of us lose touch with that authentic self at some point. According to Jung, this happens because the noise of the outside world drowns out the voice of our inner world. The expectations of others, unresolved wounds, toxic relationships. These things form a wall between who we are and who we were meant to be. But here's the hope. That wall is not permanent. You can tear it down. And the tool to do that is courage. Courage to face the pain. Courage to look inward. Courage to love yourself through the messiness of healing. Let me take a moment to share something personal with you. There was a period in my life when I carried a memory that broke me inside. A relationship I ended out of fear. And even after it was over, I kept wondering if I'd ever be enough for anyone. Every time I thought about it, my stomach would tighten. My chest would feel heavy. Until one day, inspired by Jung's teachings, I decided to stop avoiding it. I sat with that pain. I wrote about it. I spoke it out loud. I gave it form. And slowly, I realized it wasn't about that other person. It was about a part of me that needed healing. My own insecurity. My own fear of inadequacy. And do you know what happened? That emotional knot that had lived in my chest for years, it began to unravel. Not instantly, not in some magical, dramatic way, but gradually. And it changed everything. So now, I'll ask you, what memory are you ready to let go of today? Think about it, reflect on it, and stay with me, because we're about to dive even deeper. Healing from painful memories is not about pretending they don't exist. It's not just about thinking positively or distracting yourself with temporary pleasures. Real healing requires intention. It requires action. And yes, it requires courage. Carl Jung gave us a map, a framework to explore the unconscious. And what we're doing right now is taking that map and using it in your life. So get ready, because this is going to be practical. This is going to be personal. And if you allow it, it will be transformative. If you're still here, listening to my voice, it's because something inside of you is ready for change. And I promise you, whatever that something is, it's more powerful than you could ever imagine. Let's talk about relationships for a moment. Everyone has had that one connection that left them shattered. Maybe it was a romantic partner who promised you everything, only to vanish without explanation. Maybe it was a friend who betrayed your trust in the moment you needed them most. What did you do with that pain? Did you bottle it up? Lock it away in some imaginary vault, hoping time would erase it? If so, you're not alone. But Jung teaches us something radical, that pain doesn't disappear just because you hide it. It stays. It waits. It lodges itself in your unconscious, in your shadow, and keeps showing up in your life in ways you don't even realize. Maybe you now struggle to trust anyone. Maybe you shut down every time someone gets too close. Maybe you've built emotional walls so high that even you don't know what's on the other side. Do you recognize yourself in any of this? Then listen closely. There is a way out. Jung said, the unconscious speaks through symbols and patterns. So look closely at your relationships. Is there a pattern? Do you often feel invisible? Do you attract people who drain your energy, leaving you exhausted, empty? That's not random. That's not bad luck. That is your unconscious mind waving a red flag, pointing to an old wound that needs your attention. Let me tell you a story. A subscriber once wrote to me and said, "I always end up with partners who abandon me. What am I doing wrong?" And I shared a Jungian perspective. Look at your shadow. Ask yourself, what part of you believes you don't deserve lasting love? When he did the work, when he looked inward, he found a memory, a moment from childhood where he felt unwanted, rejected. And when he truly faced it, everything began to shift. So I'll ask you now, what pattern are you ready to break? Let's pause here. Close your eyes for just a moment. Breathe. Now, think of someone who hurt you deeply. Don't rush. Let their face come to mind. Hold it there. Now imagine this person standing in front of you. What would you say to them? Not from a place of anger, but from a place of self-love, from a place of truth. Maybe you'd say something like, "You hurt me, but I no longer give you the power to define who I am." Let that sink in. Let yourself feel the power of reclaiming your voice. Because this is just the beginning. Jung would say that this seemingly small act of using your imagination is actually a powerful step toward integrating your shadow. Why? Because when you speak to that memory, when you truly acknowledge it, you are not just reliving the pain, you are beginning to transform it. You are facing it head-on, gently, but with intention. And in doing so, you begin to heal. You're not avoiding, denying, or pushing it away anymore. You're recognizing it as part of your story. And that is the beginning of alchemy, of turning pain into wisdom. Take a moment now. How did that feel for you? Did something shift inside you, even if only slightly? Hold on to that feeling, no matter how small. We're going to build on it. That feeling is the seed of something profound. Because at the core of this entire process, this journey of self-discovery and shadow integration, lies one essential truth: self-love. Jung believed, and I agree with him, that it is impossible to live a full and meaningful life if we don't embrace ourselves completely. Not just the bright, admirable parts, but also the messy, hidden, wounded parts, including our shadows, especially our shadows. But here's where many of us get stuck. Many people confuse self-love with selfishness. We've been conditioned to believe that putting ourselves first is wrong, that it's something to feel guilty about. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever prioritized your needs and immediately felt shame creeping in? I know I have. There was a time in my life when I had to say no to someone who constantly demanded more from me than I had to give. I finally drew a line, and even though it was the right thing to do, I carried guilt for days, until one day something clicked. I realized that protecting my energy is not selfish, it's sacred. It's an act of reverence for myself. And Carl Jung would have agreed. Every single time you allow someone to cross your boundaries, you're sending a silent message to your unconscious mind. I'm not worthy enough to be protected. But when you stand your ground, when you say, with clarity and love, my peace matters, the message shifts. You begin to tell your entire system, I deserve to be well. I am worthy of calm. I am worthy of safety. So I ask you now, from a place of honesty and compassion, what boundaries do you need to set today to truly honor yourself? Let's explore how these hidden memories, the ones buried deep in your unconscious, can shape your future, especially your dreams. Have you ever had a goal, a dream that lit a fire inside of you, only to slowly watch it fade away? Maybe you once dreamed of traveling the world, writing a novel, starting a business, or learning something new. But somehow, that dream began to feel distant, even impossible, and you don't quite know why. Jung would say, the past is whispering to you. Imagine a child who dreams of becoming an artist. One day, someone, maybe a parent, a teacher, or a peer, says, that's not a realistic goal. That single sentence plants itself in the child's subconscious. It hides in the shadow, tucked away. But years later, that same child, now an adult, still feels resistance whenever they try to create. Doubt sneaks in. Am I really good enough? And that doubt, it's not about talent, it's a shadow echo from the past. Has anything like that ever happened to you? Because it's happened to me. There was a period in my life when I stopped creating altogether. A memory of failure had become so loud in my mind that I began to believe it was the truth. It convinced me that I wasn't talented enough, smart enough, worthy enough. But then I discovered Jung's work, and slowly I began to face that memory. I sat with it, questioned it, reframed it, and I realized something profound. That memory does not define who I am or what I am capable of. So I ask you now, what dream of yours is quietly waiting in the shadows, longing for you to heal the past so it can finally come to life? Let's go deeper. What is stealing your peace right now? Don't overthink it. Just allow the answer to rise up from within. Is it a draining relationship? A mistake you can't forgive yourself for? A fear you've tried to bury? Whatever it is, Jung would tell you, that thief lives in your shadow. And the only way to stop it from running your life is to face it. Not with fear, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, what is this pain trying to teach me? Maybe that mistake taught you how to be resilient. Maybe that toxic relationship taught you what love is not, and in doing so, showed you what you truly deserve. When you begin to see your memories through this lens, something powerful happens. They stop being chains that hold you back, and they become teachers that guide you forward. You are ready to change the way you look at your past. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine there's a memory you carry, one where someone humiliated you in front of others. Even now, when you think about it, you feel that familiar sting of shame rising in your throat. It's still there, unresolved, unhealed. Jung would invite you not to push it away, but to sit with it. Really sit with it. Write about it. Speak about it to someone you trust. Or close your eyes and visualize that scene again. But this time, see yourself responding differently. See yourself standing tall, speaking with strength, with self-love. Say to yourself, yes, this happened, but it does not define me. Little by little, that memory loses its power over you. I did this with one of my own memories, and I swear it felt like a massive weight was lifted from my chest. It was a physical shift, as if something heavy and invisible had finally let go. So let me ask you, what memory are you ready to release today? Don't wait. Don't postpone it. This is your moment, your chance to step into a new version of yourself. And I want to be honest with you. Healing is not easy. There will be days when you want to run from the pain, when you want to cover your ears, shut your eyes, and pretend everything is fine. That's normal. That's human. But Jung reminds us, true growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in the discomfort, in the moments when we dare to face what we've been avoiding for years. When you confront your shadow, when you bravely look into those painful memories, you're declaring, I choose freedom. And that freedom, it doesn't just heal your past, it transforms your present. It reshapes your relationships. You stop attracting people who wound you, and you begin to magnetize those who uplift you, who see your light, who walk beside you in truth. And isn't that worth it? We're only halfway through this journey, and now we're going even deeper. Because healing your painful memories isn't just about feeling better for a few minutes. It's about changing your life from the inside out. Carl Jung wasn't just a psychologist. He was a guide for souls searching for more authenticity, more peace, more meaning. And you, listening right now, you are one of those souls. I can feel it. I can sense it in your energy. You are ready. So let's take everything we've talked about and go to the next level. Are you with me? Good. Because it's about to get even more powerful. Let's talk about something we all face at some point. Chaos. Those moments when life feels like a storm, when nothing makes sense, and you feel lost in the middle of it. Maybe it was a breakup that left you shattered. Maybe it was a mistake that made you question your entire identity. Or maybe it was just life pulling the rug out from under you when you least expected it. Jung saw chaos as something sacred. Yes, you heard that right. Sacred. To him, chaos wasn't a sign of destruction or the end of the road. It was the beginning of something profound. Chaos, in its raw and wild form, was the fertile ground where the seeds of your transformation begin to take root. It's not the collapse that defines you, but what emerges from it. But here's the secret, one that many people overlook. You can't just sit and wait for the storm to pass, hoping for clarity or change. You have to step into that storm. You have to walk straight into the fire, eyes wide open, heart exposed. You must face the chaos, confront it, sit with its discomfort, and dig deep into the lessons it's hiding. Because chaos doesn't come empty-handed. It brings gifts, but only for those who are willing to search for them. Let me ask you something. When was the last time chaos knocked on your door? When everything felt like it was falling apart? When nothing made sense? When you were drowning in uncertainty? What did you do with that moment? Did you run from it? Did you try to numb it? Or forget it? Or did you dare to look it in the eyes? Think about it. Every painful memory you carry is like a seed buried deep within that chaos. At first glance, it may seem lifeless. It may look dark, ugly, something you want to bury even deeper. But what if I told you that this seed isn't dead? What if I told you that if you water it with awareness, with compassion, with self-love, that seed could grow into something truly beautiful, something powerful, something true? Jung called this process individuation, a journey of becoming your authentic self. Not just the parts of you that smile in the light, but all of you. The broken parts, the ashamed parts, the parts you've disowned or hidden. He believed that to be whole, you must integrate every aspect of your being, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. Now imagine for a second that the moment someone broke your heart wasn't just a wound, but a message, a lesson in disguise, a sacred whisper telling you what you truly need in love, what you deserve, and what you must stop settling for. Or that failure you thought had ruined your life. What if that was the very thing that planted the roots of your inner strength? What if you stopped viewing your past as a series of mistakes and started seeing it as your greatest teacher? Let's take a pause together, just for a moment. Take a deep breath with me. Inhale, hold it. Now exhale slowly. Now let your mind travel back to a vulnerable moment in your past. Don't resist it. Let it rise. Let it come to the surface. Can you see it? Can you feel it? Good. Now imagine that this moment isn't your enemy. It's not here to torment you. It's a teacher, a guide. In the silence of your heart, ask that moment a question. What did you come to teach me? And then, just listen. You don't have to force the answer. Trust what arises. Jung believed the unconscious holds deep wisdom. But we only hear it when we have the courage to ask, when we get quiet enough to truly listen. What did that memory tell you? Don't ignore it. Don't brush it aside, because that answer might just be the key to your healing. Now let's talk about something that many of us struggle with: relationships. Because often, it's through other people that our deepest wounds come to the surface. Relationships are like mirrors, sometimes beautiful, sometimes brutal, but always honest. They show us who we are, especially the parts we try to deny. Have you ever noticed yourself repeating the same emotional patterns, falling for the same kind of person over and over again? Maybe you're drawn to people who don't value you. Maybe you find yourself in friendships that drain your energy and leave you feeling small. You might think it's just bad luck or coincidence, but Jung would say otherwise. He would say it's projection. We project our unresolved wounds, our shadows, onto others. And in return, they reflect back to us what we have yet to heal within ourselves. Let me give you an example. If you keep attracting people who reject you, there's a chance you're projecting an old wound, perhaps a fear of abandonment, a childhood pain, a story you internalized long ago that says you are not enough. That pain lives in your shadow, and until it's seen, it keeps writing your story without your awareness. Does that resonate with you? So here's the challenge. The next time someone hurts you, instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" try asking, "What is this showing me about myself?" Because within that reflection, however painful, it might be pointing you toward the very part of yourself that's ready to be healed. Chaos, pain, heartbreak. They aren't your enemies. They are the fire that forges your strength. They are the sacred messengers of your transformation. You're not here to stay comfortable. You're here to evolve. And evolution always begins in the dark. So the next time life breaks you open, don't run, don't hide. Step into the chaos and listen, because the universe is whispering something only you were meant to hear. I'm going to share something deeply vulnerable. Years ago, I was in a relationship that left me shattered. This person constantly made me feel like I was never enough. At first, I was convinced the problem was them, how they treated me, how they made me feel, how little they seemed to care. I held on to that narrative for a long time, believing that I was just a victim of someone else's coldness and cruelty. But then, something shifted. I came across the work of Carl Jung, and everything started to make sense in a way it never had before. Jung spoke of the concept of the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves that we refuse to see, the pieces we've rejected, buried, or denied. And suddenly, it hit me. That person wasn't just hurting me, they were reflecting me. They were a mirror, showing me the parts of myself I hadn't yet healed. The pain I felt didn't originate from them. It came from within, from a deep, unhealed place inside me, a wound rooted in my childhood. I remembered moments when I felt invisible, overlooked, unheard. That relationship merely awakened a wound that was already there. Facing that realization wasn't easy. It shook me. But when I confronted it, when I allowed myself to feel the pain, to sit with the discomfort, to stop blaming and start understanding, I didn't just heal from that relationship. I transformed the way I relate to others entirely. Now, when someone crosses my boundaries, I don't stay silent. I speak up. I honor my voice. I protect my peace. And that's something I never thought I was capable of before. Let me ask you something. What past wound is shaping your current relationships? What unresolved pain is quietly scripting the story of your love life, your friendships, your self-worth? Here's a hard truth, but a liberating one. You can't heal what you're not willing to face. Jung used to say, "What you resist persists." And he was right. Every time you run away from a painful memory, you give it more power. It doesn't disappear. It grows. It becomes a monster, lurking in the shadow, feeding off your silence and avoidance. But when you shine a light on it, when you choose to look at it, truly see it, that monster begins to shrink. That's when healing begins. It's not painless. There will be tears. There will be days when you want to give up, when the weight feels unbearable. But there will also be moments of release, of clarity, of a peace you haven't felt in years. Isn't that worth trying for? Let's talk about how self-love connects to all of this, because healing your past isn't just about letting go of pain. It's about rebuilding your relationship with yourself. Jung believed that self-love wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity, and it begins the moment you stop running from your shadows and start embracing them. It begins when you look at your regrets, your failures, your traumas, and instead of rejecting them, you say, "I see you. You are a part of me, and I'm learning to love you too." Picture this. You're standing in front of a mirror. Instead of picking yourself apart, instead of listing all the things you wish were different, you look into your own eyes and say, "I see you. I know you've been through so much, but I'm proud of you." When was the last time you spoke to yourself like that? If you can't remember, maybe today is the perfect day to start. Let me ask you another question. What are you telling yourself that's keeping you from happiness, from love, from success? Those messages, those inner critics, didn't come from nowhere. They were born from past experiences, from people or moments that convinced you that something was broken inside of you. But Jung would argue, you're not broken, you're incomplete. And the way to complete yourself is by reintegrating the parts of you that you've rejected, abandoned, or forgotten. So, take a moment. Breathe. Say it with me. I deserve to heal. I deserve to feel whole. I deserve peace. Say it again. Repeat it until you believe it. Because once you believe it, everything changes. Now let me offer you a simple but powerful exercise. Take a piece of paper and write down a painful memory you've been carrying. Don't overthink it. Don't filter yourself. Just let it pour out. Let the memory take shape on the page. Then look at what you've written and ask yourself, what did this experience teach me? Once you've reflected, write one sentence of self-love beneath it. Despite this, I choose to love myself. You can keep the paper, or if it feels right, you can burn it as a symbol of release. I did this once with a memory of rejection that haunted me for years. And I swear to you, the moment the paper turned to ash, it felt like I was shedding armor I didn't even know I was wearing. Would you be willing to try it? This is the kind of inner work Jung would celebrate. Not passive reflection, but courageous action. We've reached the end of this journey together, but it's not a goodbye. It's the beginning of something new. Everything we've explored so far, everything Jung taught us, has led us to this moment, to this truth. Your painful memories are not chains. They are fuel. They are the raw materials of your transformation. So take a deep breath. Let it fill you with strength. This is your moment to rise, to reclaim your life, to step into your authentic self. Are you ready to discover what it means to live from a place of truth? Are you ready to truly heal? Let's begin. Jung had a powerful idea: synchronicity. Have you ever noticed that when you start to change on the inside, the world around you begins to shift too? That isn't a coincidence. That's synchronicity. It's the universe responding to your courage. When you begin to face your inner shadows, those wounds, fears, and memories that have kept you stuck, and you finally begin to heal them, life begins to fall into place in ways that feel almost magical. But it's not magic. It's alignment. It's transformation. It's you, becoming who you were, always meant to be. Let me tell you a story. I once met a subscriber who had spent years in a toxic relationship. She felt invisible, drained, and unworthy. But one day, she decided to let go. Not just of the person, but of the pattern, the cycle, the part of herself that believed she wasn't enough. She did the hard work. She confronted her shadow. And something amazing happened. She landed a job she was passionate about. She met new friends who truly saw her, appreciated her, and respected her. That's not magic. That's the power of healing. That's synchronicity in action. Now I ask you, what could begin to align in your life if you had the courage to heal? Just for a moment, let's pause together. Take a deep breath with me. Inhale and exhale. Now, I want you to imagine your life without the weight of those memories. Imagine waking up without the heaviness in your chest, without the voice in your head that doubts your worth. How would you feel? What would you do differently? Would you dare to love again? Would you finally chase that dream you buried years ago? Jung used to say that what we often call dreams are not fantasies. They're glimpses. Glimpses of what our unconscious mind already knows is possible. That vision you see for yourself, it's real. But to get there, you have to let go. Let go of the pain, the guilt, the excuses. Let go of the relationships that keep you tethered to who you used to be. So let me ask you, what are you ready to release today? Let's talk about purpose for a moment. Jung believed that the meaning of life isn't about chasing happiness. It's about living in wholeness. And wholeness only comes when you're living as your true self. But here's the hard truth. Most of us aren't. We walk through life wearing masks. Masks that say, "I'm fine," when we're breaking inside. Masks that say, "I don't need anyone," when deep down, we're longing for connection. These masks help us survive, but they also keep us from truly living. What mask are you wearing today? Is it the one that pretends you're in control? The one that hides your sadness? The one that keeps people at arm's length so they never see the real you? Healing peels away those masks. It exposes you, not to shame you, but to free you. It brings you back to your raw, authentic self. And yes, it's terrifying, but it's also the most liberating thing you will ever do. Let me be clear with you. The world needs you to heal. Yes, you. Because when you heal, you don't just change your life. You create ripples. You change the lives of the people around you. Your family, your friends, even strangers who cross your path. Your courage becomes their inspiration. Imagine that you shared this video with someone who's struggling right now. Maybe your words in the comments will be the exact message they need to hear to begin their own journey. Don't hold this back. Don't keep it to yourself. Be part of something bigger than you. Jung believed we're all connected. Your healing is not just yours. It's a gift to the world. Before we close, I have one last exercise for you. Close your eyes. Bring to mind a memory that still hurts. A memory you rarely talk about, but always feel. Now picture yourself wrapping that memory in light. See it glowing, gently surrounded by warmth and peace. Then say to it, "Thank you for what you taught me, but I don't need you anymore," and feel it dissolve. Watch it fade away like mist in the morning sun. I remember doing this with one of my own memories, and when I opened my eyes, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. I want that for you. Try it. And when you do, tell me about it in the comments. I want to know. I want to hear your story. If this message touched something in you, don't let it end here. Share it with someone who needs healing. Leave a comment below and tell me, what memory are you ready to heal? What action will you take today? Your words matter more than you know. They don't just inspire me, they inspire everyone who reads them. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Every week, I bring you more content like this so we can keep growing together. Every time you comment, share, or interact, you're helping this message reach someone who might need it more than you can imagine. Life is a canvas, and you're holding the brush. As Carl Jung showed us, it's not about erasing the past, it's about using it to paint something beautiful. So get up, face your shadows, speak your truth. Because when you do, you don't just heal your most painful memories, you become the person you are always destined to be. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this family. I'll see you in the next video. And remember this, change begins with you. Have you ever wondered why some people feel so deeply while others seem to move through the world untouched? Could it be that empathy is truly a virtue, or is it a curse disguised as nobility? And what if I told you that your sensitivity is not a spiritual gift, but a psychological scar that learned to smile? The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, said Carl Jung. But what happens when, from the very beginning, everything you are was shaped to keep others comfortable? When your very existence is reduced to the silent mission of feeling on behalf of others what they never wanted to feel themselves? If you are here, perhaps you have already noticed something unusual about the way you exist. Maybe you often feel drained without knowing why. Maybe you've spent your whole life apologizing for having needs. Maybe you carry an anger you don't know how to name, a fire burning within. Not because you hate others, but because for years you have forgotten yourself. This is not a hymn to the empath. It is a dissection, a ritual of clarity, a brutal yet necessary invitation to look in the mirror and face the question most people avoid. And what if my kindness were only a well-trained defense mechanism? Today, guided by the abyssal psychology of Carl Jung, we are going to explore the wound that gave birth to your way of feeling. We are going to pull apart what lies beneath your compassion and why it may be silently destroying you. You were not born empathic, you were born human. But at some point, and you might not even remember exactly when, your survival instinct was forced to transform into sensitivity, not because it was beautiful, but because it was necessary. Jung never romanticized empathy the way social media does today. He understood that many times a good heart is really a stifled cry. A child who learned too early that emotions were dangerous, that asking was risky, that taking up space was punishable. So that child learned the subtle art of disappearing, of feeling for others everything no one wanted to feel for them. Empathy for Jung often arises as a neurotic response, not a choice, but a mechanism, a shield disguised as an embrace, a prison disguised as love. Emotional hypervigilance is born not from evolution, but from survival. It becomes the embryo of what we call empathy in adulthood. But Jung gave it another name: premature adaptation of the ego. It happens when a child's psyche, pressured by an unstable environment, rushes ahead in its development. It learns codes it should not know. It becomes too mature, too soon. It transforms into the advisor, the shield, the healer, and in the process, disappears. Have you ever felt that no matter how much you give, how present you are, how tirelessly you help, no one takes care of you in the same way? That is the hidden root of neurotic empathy, the habit of giving as survival, not as generosity. You learned that love came with an emotional bill, that you were only valued when you did something for others, that caretaking was the safest way to avoid abandonment. You became an antenna, picking up pain, silences, and subtleties. But what about you? Who ever picked up on you? Jung said that the true tragedy is not having a shadow, but not knowing it exists. And in the empath, that shadow is made of rage, ego, and need. All the things you learned to repress to be accepted, everything you call selfishness, but which is really your right to exist. How many times did you swallow your tears to avoid disturbing others? How many times did you bend yourself to someone's mood just to keep the peace? How many times did you say, "I'm fine," while silently begging for an embrace? Compulsive empathy is not a virtue. It is trauma refined. It is a soul that learned to survive by silencing itself, by loving excessively, by always yielding. And that kind of empathy comes with a heavy price. It costs you health, energy, and identity. It turns you into a useful ghost, always present, always invisible. And here lies the cruelest paradox. The empath suffers for feeling too much, yet fears stopping. Because if they stop, they believe love will vanish, the bond will break, and without sacrifice, they will be disposable. But Jung warns us, the soul needs truth more than peace. And the truth is that you do need to learn to be selfish, not vulgar, destructive, narcissistic selfishness, but what Jung called healthy narcissism, the capacity to recognize yourself as legitimate, to say no, to put yourself at the center of your own life without fear of being hated. The empath falls ill when they do not understand that being good does not mean erasing oneself, that true love demands boundaries, that compassion is not carrying others on your back, but extending your hand with both feet firmly on the ground. You do not need to save anyone. You need to stop abandoning yourself. How many times have you felt proud of being the one everyone turns to when they're broken? Now ask yourself, whom do you turn to when it is you who needs help? Do you see the imbalance between all you give and how little you allow yourself to receive? Deep down, you still believe love depends on your usefulness. You still hear that inner voice whispering, "If I don't help, I'll be left behind." Jung called that conditional identity, a version of you created to satisfy the expectations of others, a golden cage where applause is endless but freedom non-existent. You are not merely empathic, you are trapped in a cycle of emotional self-denial. And the worst part is, the world applauds you. They call you generous, sensitive, with a huge heart. But no one sees the exhaustion. No one notices how much rage you swallow, how much frustration builds in silence, how often you dream of vanishing. All of it sinks into the shadow. Jung said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." It is time to bring that darkness to light, to recognize that your empathy is beautiful only when it is not born of guilt, not born of fear, not compulsive. You can be good, but only if you are good to yourself too. You can care, but not at the expense of your sanity. You can love, but only if you include yourself in that love. The hidden root of empathy is not generosity, it is survival. It is that child who never could be selfish, never could scream, never could demand, and so became someone who feels for everyone except themselves. But something within you is changing now. You are beginning to listen to yourself. You are tired of pleasing. For the first time, you are considering putting yourself first. And that is a revolution. Because as Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you, dear empath, were not born to be the emotional backbone of a broken world. You were born to be whole, with light and shadow, with love and anger, with empathy and ego. To be good is not to die for others. To be good is to live for yourself, and then overflow. Now, there is something you need to know. Have you ever noticed that precisely when you most need to stay calm, your mind collapses? That loss of control is not only emotional, it is mental. It happens because most of us were trained to feel before thinking, to react before observing. The problem is structural. No one taught us to train the mind like a muscle. That is why every minor frustration becomes an explosion, and every challenge an inner defeat. But there is another way to operate, a structure based on neuroscience, applied philosophy, and silent mental techniques that reprogram the way you respond and return command to you. There are children who, even before learning to read, already master the invisible vocabulary of other people's emotions. They don't need anyone to say, "I'm sad." They feel it, they sense it, they anticipate it. They develop a kind of silent radar that detects the scream before the sound, the blow before the gesture, the disappointment before the word. These children are not magical, they are survivors. Carl Jung called this psychic antennas, a form of emotional hypersensitivity that arises when the family environment is not safe enough for the child to simply exist. They learn that the world around them is unpredictable, and that to survive, they must grow eyes where no one sees, ears where no one speaks, intuitions where logic cannot reach. They become emotional sentinels, not by choice, but because their integrity depends on it. Do you remember what it was like? Watching every step of your parents, deciphering their mood just by hearing a tiny shift in tone, walking carefully as if the floor were made of invisible glass, realizing that sometimes silence was more dangerous than shouting. The antenna child grows up believing their own feelings are dangerous. If they cry, they are called weak. If they laugh too loud, they are exaggerated. If they ask for attention, they are selfish. So they learn not to express themselves, and later, not even to feel. But here lies a cruel truth. When you silence your pain, your body keeps screaming, only from within. That child becomes the adult who picks up everything. The energy in the room, the unspoken pain of another, the tension carried in a glance. They become the friend who feels something is wrong, the partner who notices the mood shift, the worker who knows when the boss will explode. They become useful, even admired, but not for who they are, rather for how much they can adjust to others. Jung saw this as a profound imbalance, a socially accepted neurosis, because it shows up as generosity, empathy, altruism, but deep inside, it is a refined form of self-abandonment. You feel everything from everyone, all the time, except yourself. And do you know why? Because looking inward hurts more than absorbing the pain of the world, because your own wound is too ancient, too heavy, ignored for too long, and terrifying to face. Jung called this inner disconnection a soul excision. It is when you specialize so much in feeling the other that you become a stranger to yourself. How many times have you found yourself in relationships where you were always the one who understood, the one who forgave, the one who explained their side? How many times did you justify emotional harm by saying, they had a hard childhood, or they don't know how to handle their feelings? You are not compassionate. You were conditioned. You don't forgive with your heart. You forgive with guilt. You don't understand with empathy. You understand with fear. Fear of rejection if you demand respect. Fear of abandonment if you set boundaries. Fear of being called selfish if you dare to choose yourself. And here lies the psychic price of feeling too much. You stop being a self and become an extension of the other. You know what they want, feel, and need. But when someone asks you, what do you want? Silence swallows you because you don't know. You became fluent at interpreting others, but illiterate about yourself. Jung said, the soul cannot bear lies for too long. It begins to scream through anxiety, chronic exhaustion, repeated relationships, the feeling that something is wrong with me and I don't know what it is. That cry is often silenced with more empathy. You help more, you listen more, you carry more. But the truth is, you need a hug and no one ever gave it. You need to be seen, but not as the person who understands everyone. You need to be seen as someone who also needs understanding. And that terrifies the child who grew up praised for being mature, because breaking that role means breaking the identity built over a lifetime. But what if Jung was right? What if that identity is an illusion? What if you are not truly that endlessly empathetic, available, understanding person, but rather someone who learned to be that way, to survive in a world where being authentic was dangerous? You feel too much, not because you are enlightened, but because you were too exposed, too vulnerable, subtly abandoned. Your extreme sensitivity is, in truth, the trace of abandonment. It is the symptom of a childhood where you had to monitor the climate so you wouldn't be swallowed by the storm. Jung knew what that produced: repressed rage, fragmented self-esteem, hunger for recognition, unconscious attraction to emotionally unavailable people. You don't want to be loved. You desperately want to finally be enough. But for that, you will have to disappoint some people, the ones who grew accustomed to your docility, the ones who feed on your guilt, the ones who call change your first step toward freedom. You will have to abandon the role of antenna, and that is frightening, because deep down, you feel that if you are not useful, you will be discarded. But the truth Jung left us is different. You will never be whole as long as you are only the reflection of another. It is time to turn inward, to rescue the child who once learned that feeling for others was safer than being herself. She is still there, scared but alive, and she longs to be embraced not as a spiritual tool, not as an emotional warrior, but as what she always was, a human being who deserved to exist without fixing anyone. That is your task now, to sit with that child, to be with her in silence, to say, I no longer need to guess what others feel. Now I want to know what I feel. And when that inner voice begins to surface, fragile, doubtful, confused, listen to it. Listen with the same care you always gave to others. Listen as one who holds a broken mirror with steady hands and an open heart. Because you are not an antenna, you are a complete being, with history, with wounds, with a voice, and at last, with permission to use it. Every empath has a limit, and almost no one notices when that limit has been crossed, because they don't shout, they don't fight, they swallow it. But inside, there is a fire. Carl Jung warned us, everything we don't face within will appear outside as destiny. And perhaps that is the empath's destiny, to end up surrounded by people they themselves taught not to respect them, not out of cruelty, but out of habit, through a silent history of self-abandonment disguised as kindness. The empath, that apparently sweet, understanding, enlightened being, carries a heavy, throbbing shadow hidden beneath the cloak of goodness. And that shadow, dear one, is rage. Not loud rage, but ashamed rage. Rage that was never allowed to exist. Rage that learned to silence itself, to turn into "it's fine," into "it was nothing," into "let it go," but that never forgets what was denied, stores it, and collects its debt. Jung said, the unconscious is timeless. What was not lived still pulses inside us, demanding passage, demanding existence. And in the case of the empath, what was not lived was the right to protect themselves, to say no, to stay, to leave, to have desires. Do you realize that your rage is always turned inward? You help too much and feel used, but you say nothing. You always give in and feel small, but you smile. You are the last to be heard, and still you thank for a listening that never came. How long? How long will you carry others' weight, believing it makes you better? That is not kindness. It is prison. Jung called this process shadow formation, by moral conditioning. It is when everything you feel, but that doesn't fit the ideal imposed on you, gets thrown into the depths of the soul. Rage, frustration, ego, desire, fatigue, all labeled ugly, wrong, selfish. But what happens to all that you repressed? It becomes symptom, turns into chest pain, becomes insomnia, becomes exhaustion, becomes chronic resentment, and sooner or later, it becomes explosion. The person who always said yes, one day screams. The one who always understood, one day cuts ties. The one who carried the world, one day drops everything, and no one understands why. How could you change? You were always so accessible. What a disappointment. A disappointment for whom? For those who got used to your silence? For those who projected the role of savior, therapist, parent onto you? Jung called this projective identification. People do not relate to you. They relate to the role you assumed. And when you start dismantling that role, they feel betrayed. But the truth is, you had already betrayed yourself when you accepted a part you never wanted to play. And here is the crucial point. That rage beating within you is legitimate. It is yours. It is sacred. It is life energy telling you, enough. Enough of swallowing it all. Enough of staying silent. Enough of justifying yourself for having human needs. You have the right to say no, to fail, to refuse to help, to choose your own well-being without giving explanations. The rage of the empath is not destructive. It is the vital signal of a soul tired of pretending docility. But before it can set you free, you need to look at it with new eyes, without fear, without shame. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. And for the empath, that darkness is the repressed scream. It is the boundary never set. It is the life pushed aside so the other could be comfortable. Does it seem beautiful to give all of yourself? And you, what do you receive? Does it seem noble to always forgive? And who forgives you? Empathy without regulation becomes prison. You get lost in others' emotions and forget that you too have a heart that bleeds. How many times did you want to scream, enough, but only said, "It's okay. How many times did you think, and me," but kept smiling. That emotional repetition creates an existential void. You become an empty vessel, useful, functional, lovable, but empty. And that is why rage appears. It wants to wake you up, to remind you that you are still alive. Rage, deep down, is self-love that learned to wear armor. Do not run from it. Do not fear that fire. Learn to direct it. Jung spoke of the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to unite opposites. In your case, empathy and boundary, kindness and firmness, sweetness and protection. That union is what he called the integration of the shadow. It is not about choosing between remaining good or becoming cold. It is about allowing yourself to be whole. You don't need to be less sensitive, but you do need to be more complete. The person you long to be, the one who loves without erasing themselves, who helps without destroying themselves, only emerges when you face your shadow and say, "I see you, I hold you, I release you." The rage of the empath is the fury of one who was never seen, who was used as an emotional anchor without ever being able to anchor in anyone, who carried the world's traumas on the fragile shoulders of a child who only wanted a hug. And do you know what the first step toward healing is? Saying no without guilt, without justifying yourself, without fearing the loss of a love that only existed while you denied yourself. The empath, in order to flourish, must frustrate expectations, must disappoint those accustomed to their submission, must break the cycle that held them captive, even the cycle within. Jung called this the courage to individuate, to become who you truly are, even if that means abandoning who you pretended to be. And that courage begins with one simple, radical act: choosing yourself. There comes a moment when the empath, the one who feels everything for everyone all the time, finally perceives an uncomfortable truth. No one asked you to sacrifice yourself, and yet you sacrificed for peace, for acceptance, for love, for a safe place in the world. But what did you get back? Silence, exhaustion, invisibility. It has been said that an unlived life is a sickness of the soul. And perhaps this is the silent illness of so many empaths, living halfway to sustain the image of someone who always says yes, someone who loves, helps, endures, even when everything inside begs for rest. Then a subtle moment arrives, sometimes almost imperceptible, when something breaks inside. An invisible thread that always kept the empath tied to the savior role snaps, and what follows is a void, not the void of lacking, but the void of discovery. The discovery that you spent years being good out of fear, that your generosity was compulsive, that your capacity to listen to everyone was a way to silence yourself. You called it love, but it was an escape from rejection, from loneliness, from your own emotional complexity, an escape from the truth. A certain wise voice taught that the path toward healing begins with confrontation. And there is no confrontation tougher than this, realizing that sacrifice was never a choice. It was programming, conditioning, survival. Since childhood, you learned that your feelings were not a priority. You were the strong one, the mature one, the different one. You could not make mistakes, complain, or shout. You were praised for taking care of others. But nobody noticed that by doing so, you were stopping living. They shaped you to attend, not to be attended to listen, not to speak, to give, not to receive. And so a specific kind of prison is born, the prison of obligatory goodness. But here lies the secret many ignore. True altruism only arises from choice. When it comes from fear, it is only slavery under another name. So ask yourself now, honestly, without defenses. How many times did you say yes when you wanted to say no? How many times did you love someone who hurt you just to keep the connection? How many times did you put another's pain above your own and then cry in secret? This is where emotional authenticity is born, not as a pretty ideal or a theoretical concept, but as a cry of the soul, as an urgency, the urgency to stop lying to yourself. You no longer need to erase yourself to keep the peace. You no longer need to sacrifice yourself to be loved. You no longer need to hide your pain behind empathy. Emotional authenticity is born the exact moment you decide to stop being a character. It arises in the discomfort of disappointing others, in the pain of losing ties that only existed because you pretended not to have desires. It is born like any real birth, with pain, with blood, with rupture. And like every birth, it demands courage. Courage to look the one you love in the eyes and say, I can't keep abandoning myself to keep you close. That is not cruelty, it is psychic maturity. A certain psychological tradition calls this process the transcending of the persona, the social mask we use to be accepted. For the empath, that mask goes by names like good, understanding, strong, mature. But that mask suffocates. One teacher warned that the more perfect the mask, the more the soul is suffocated. So you have to choose. Will you keep being the functional empath, admired and exhausted? Or will you begin to build your true self, even if that brings twisted looks, accusations of selfishness, and the loss of some relationships? It is a choice, and perhaps for the first time, you are ready to make it. Emotional authenticity is like opening a window in a room where the air was already scarce. At first, the wind frightens you. You feel cold, dizzy, but little by little, you realize you can breathe. Breathe without needing to please. Breathe without calculating the emotional impact of every word. Breathe without being everyone's emotional consolation. Another teaching says, the authentic self is the one that integrates all rejected parts. And for the empath, one of those rejected parts is precisely the right to exist without guilt. You have the right to exist without justification, to have no energy, to change your mind, to care for yourself before caring for others. That is not selfishness. It is emotional justice. And there lies the key to transformation. Your empathy does not need to die. It simply needs to stop being compulsive and become a choice. You can keep feeling, but now with discernment. You can keep helping, but now with boundaries. You can keep loving, but now with roots. Emotional authenticity does not eliminate sensitivity. It sharpens it. It transforms empathy from a silent curse into a conscious gift and returns you to yourself. And in the end, perhaps what the old teachers most wanted to show is that individuation is in truth a return, not to the person others expect you to be, but to the one you always were before you learned to hide, sacrifice, or choice. You no longer have to die for anyone. Now you can be born for yourself. There comes a point when you look at everything you built and realize that much of your life was shaped not by desire, but by duty. Friends you maintained to avoid hurting someone, relationships you held together to avoid disappointing, family you tolerated in silence, while inside you died a little at each gathering. You called that love, but it might be a neurotic adaptation, the version of yourself you manufactured to be loved, even if that meant disappearing. This chapter is about return, not the shallow, essential self sold by coaches, but the center of gravity of your psyche, sovereignty. A maxim says, "He who looks outward dreams, he who looks inward wakes." Waking for the empath means realizing that your gift only becomes power when it's freed from the obligation to save the world. The empath was not born to be a martyr. They were born to be whole. But how to achieve that when everything, absolutely everything, pushes you back into the caregiver role? When your identity was built on the idea that your value lies in being useful, sensitive, sacrificial. Start with rupture. The rupture that at first seems selfishness, but gradually reveals itself as courage. Courage to choose yourself. Courage to disappoint. Courage to be unavailable all the time. Courage to be clear, even when that causes silence. Courage to have needs, to be inconvenient, to be real. Some call this psychic differentiation. The moment you understand, I am not others. I am not what they expect of me. I am an autonomous universe, and that universe has its own laws, limits, desires. It has yes and no. From this point, the empath's journey changes direction. They stop functioning as an emotional thermometer of their surroundings and begin to be an axis. Someone who feels, yes, but chooses what to do with what they feel. Someone who loves, but who also loves themselves. This new empath is what some would call individuated, no longer driven by an unconscious need to repair, but propelled by the conscious strength of simply existing. They learn that not every pain is theirs to carry. Not every story deserves their ear. Not every request demands an answer. For someone who lived as a reflection, this is liberating but also painful, because it requires breaking invisible contracts with those who grew used to using them as an emotional crutch. You will disappoint people. You will be accused of having changed. You will hear that you are distant, cold, strange. But remember, those words come from those who benefited from your lack of boundaries, from those who confused empathy with servitude. And here is the most powerful twist. The relationships that survive your sovereignty are the only ones that deserve to remain. This phenomenon is relational recalibration. Dynamics reorganize, fragile ties break, true bonds deepen, and finally you realize it wasn't you who was hard to love. It was your relationships that were too superficial to hold your depth. That is the beauty of emotional sovereignty. You stop begging for spaces that crush you and begin to inhabit spaces that expand you. But beware, sovereignty has a price. You will no longer have excuses. You will no longer be able to say, "I did it because they forced me." You must own your decisions, your absences, your presence, your silence. And many retreat here because it is easier to keep saving others than to face the void of not knowing who you are without that function. It's more comfortable to remain the pleasant one than to be the selfish person who prioritizes their mental health. But you already know, every comfort that demands your absence is a kind of emotional suicide. So choose the discomfort of presence, the weight of truth, the nakedness of authenticity. You don't have to be the hero, the mirror, or the eternal shoulder. You can simply be you, flawed with desires, contradictions, intensity, and rest. Another wise teaching said, true freedom is born when you accept your wholeness. And the empath's wholeness does not reside only in their light, but also in their shadow, in their fatigue, in their anger, in their silence. Sovereignty is not a permanent state of balance. It is the capacity to hold yourself without needing external applause to feel complete. You are not responsible for everyone, nor for the world's moods, nor for the wounds of those who refuse to heal. Your greatest responsibility now is to yourself, and paradoxically, when you choose yourself, You are finally able to choose others with more truth, without guilt, without dependence, without effort. You help because you want to, not because you need to. You listen because you have the energy, not because you are obliged. You love because you overflow, not because you beg for acceptance. That is sovereignty. And for the empath, that is rebirth. So breathe deeply. You are not betraying anyone. For the first time, you are being loyal to yourself. And that, my dear, is the true miracle of conscious empathy. At the end of everything, when the night is more honest than any daytime words, a question arises we can no longer sweep under the emotional rug. And when will someone care for me? Maybe you spent your life being someone's shoulder, the emotional anchor for many. Maybe you learned that loving is caring, serving, offering, even emptying yourself completely. And everyone applauds you for that. They call it compassion, generosity, a gift. But a brutally honest perspective offers a different view. Not all empathy is virtue. Sometimes it is only the scar of a childhood in which you had to feel for everyone because no one was willing to feel for you. The empath is not born only with a big heart. They are formed in environments where their own heart had to shape itself to others' pain to avoid disappearing. Environments where they learned that being loved requires effort, that existing means being useful, that others' silence must be filled with their constant listening. You became a mirror, a cure, a crutch. By so much reflecting, you forgot your own face. But now something has moved within you, perhaps imperceptibly, like the first tremor before an earthquake, perhaps as a subtle discomfort, a different tiredness, a need to no longer be available, and for the first time, not feel guilty about it. That is the seed of your individuation. This process of becoming who you are does not arrive as illumination, but as crisis. You don't wake up one day feeling free. You collapse, you abandon the character, you break the armor, and you allow the true self, the one you left behind to fit in, to finally return. But that self returns with demands. It no longer wants to be useful. It wants to be free. It wants to love without begging. It wants to give without emptying. It wants to be without having to save anyone. And that is where everything begins to reorganize. Relationships dissolve, patterns break, and you hear for the first time phrases like, "You're different. You're not the same." Have you become more selfish? Perhaps your response may be a silent smile, because now you understand. It isn't selfishness, it is sovereignty. You're not abandoning anyone, you've simply stopped abandoning yourself. For the first time, you can see that the cries you heard in others' emotions were echoes of your own drowned voice. We are warned that the shadow, that forgotten part of the soul, is not a villain. It is the part of you you had to bury to be accepted. In the empath's case, the shadow is made of will, of a legitimate rage, of tiredness, of boundaries never expressed, of desires that never had permission to exist. And now, that shadow no longer wants to be hidden. It wants to be integrated. You don't need to heal by becoming less sensitive. You need to heal by becoming more authentic. Because deep down, healing is not becoming another person. Healing is stopping the pretense. You will still feel a lot, but now you will choose who deserves access to your feeling. You will still love, but now you will know when that love begins to hurt you. You will still help, but not to be loved, because you overflow. Finally, you understand that true empathy is not the kind that makes you vanish. It is the kind that is born of your wholeness. And do you know the most beautiful part? You no longer need to explain yourself. You can simply exist with presence, depth, silence, and choice. And if the world keeps telling you you've changed, you look in the mirror, perhaps with tears, and whisper, "Yes, at last I have." For the privilege of a life is to become who you really are. If you've made it this far, perhaps you already feel it in your flesh. You're no longer trying to win the world's love. You are finally learning to love yourself enough to choose where and with whom you wish to remain whole. And now the remaining question is not how to please others, but what keeps me alive. I needed to write this script with the lights off, truly, like talking to someone in the dead of night, not to teach or to convince, but because something inside needed to be heard too. For years I was that person described here. The empath, understanding, reliable, the one who listened to everyone, helped everyone, and returned home with a tiredness no bed could cure, would say, "It's okay, even with pain that wasn't mine." You swallowed offenses as if swallowing guilt. You truly believed that putting others first was a way of being good. But there was a night, one of those nights no one posts on social media, when you collapsed in your bathroom without an audience, without a pretty speech, without a rational explanation. You simply broke. It was then you understood what individuation meant. It is not a pretty process. It is visceral, solitary, like tearing off a mask that had become skin. And if you are listening now, perhaps you have already lived your own broken dawn. Or maybe you are on the verge of it. Whatever the case, I thank you deeply for allowing yourself to feel this video, for not fleeing from the words that hurt, for walking with me between lucidity and delirium. Your empathy is not weakness. It simply needs to be a choice, not a sentence. Perhaps today you will say your first no without guilt. Maybe tomorrow you'll say, "I need to," without shrinking. Or maybe you will simply breathe deeply, close your eyes, and for the first time feel, "I deserve to care for myself." If that happens, if a single line from this video turns into action in your life, then every word was worth it. If you've made it this far, chances are you have a habit of sticking around, even when things probably lasted longer than they should have. Maybe you've lingered in draining conversations, unhealthy relationships, or repetitive patterns that refuse to break. But for now, let yourself become both the closing chapter and the first page of something brand new. And hey, if after watching this, you decide not to comment, subscribe, or hit like, that's perfectly okay. I'll just take it as a sign of your kindness. No added expectations for me to carry. But if you feel called to join me in this slightly wild, thoughtful adventure, you know how to show your support. Give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts below, subscribe, or send this along to a friend who always seems cheerful but quietly bears the world alone. As for the two videos on your screen, one might send you spiraling into your next profound reflection, and the other could be the lifeline you didn't know you needed. You'll only know if you give them a shot. I'll catch you on the next deep dive, or maybe during one of those late nights when pretending everything's fine gets exhausting. Until then, remember, treat yourself with the same tenderness you've always offered to others. Imagine this. You are sitting in a silent room. The walls are bare. The clock has stopped ticking. And although everything around you seems calm, inside of you, there's a deafening noise. It's not physical. It doesn't come from outside. It's ancient, intangible pressure. A persistent echo that you can't trace back to a specific moment, but it's always there, like an invisible weight your soul has been dragging for centuries. A burden that nobody else can see, but that you feel every second of every day. You've read all the books about money. You've repeated affirmations. You've taken courses, followed step-by-step systems, drawn mental maps, tried every strategy out there. You've pushed yourself beyond exhaustion. You've said yes when every fiber of your being screamed no. You've settled for crumbs, hoping the universe would eventually reward your obedience with abundance. But it never came. Not really. And the most frustrating part is, you don't know why. You did everything right. You followed the rules. And still, inside, you feel broken. Maybe you can't even put into words what you feel. All you know is that every time something good seems to be getting close, some part of you pushes it away. You sabotage it. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It's a whisper, barely audible, that says, "You're not enough. You don't deserve this. You weren't born to have so much." And you obey, not consciously, not rationally, but energetically. You step back. You shrink. You self-sabotage. You hide. And the cycle repeats itself again and again. Now listen carefully. What if the real issue was never about money? What if the true obstacle isn't your bank account, your skill set, or your environment, but a deep, untreated wound buried in your soul? What if, from the deepest part of your being, you are the one rejecting the prosperity you claim to desire? Not because you're unaware, but because you're unconsciously loyal to your pain. Carl Jung, one of the deepest explorers of the human psyche, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And what if this so-called fate, the bad luck, the lack of opportunities, the injustice, is nothing more than a mirror reflecting a part of your soul that's been broken for a long time? A part that from a very young age learned that love hurts, that success is dangerous, that being seen is unsafe. A part that was wounded and never learned to trust again. And so, year after year, you built an identity based on survival. A version of yourself that doesn't want to be rich, that doesn't want to be free, that doesn't want to shine. It just wants to feel safe. But here lies the contradiction. You cannot be free and safe at the same time. Prosperity demands exposure. Abundance requires openness. And a wounded soul doesn't want to open. It wants to hide. It wants to protect itself. It wants to disappear. So let me ask you, and answer with brutal honesty. Have you ever felt guilty for wanting more? Have you ever sabotaged yourself right when you were about to succeed? Do you feel like there's something deep inside of you that simply won't allow you to receive? If the answer is yes, then maybe, just maybe, you're not broken. Maybe you're just fragmented. And that's where the most dangerous and transformative question begins. What part of me believes that being poor is safer than being free? And am I truly willing to go deep enough to find it? This isn't a video about money techniques. This isn't about shallow motivation or magical thinking. This isn't about attracting wealth by repeating empty positive phrases. This is a descent, an exploration into what's really holding you back. A raw and honest gaze into your shadow. The one Jung said holds all the parts of yourself you've rejected in order to be accepted by others. That shadow is now demanding to be seen, because as long as you avoid looking at it, it will keep silently steering your life. And if you dare to look honestly, you will understand. Your soul isn't just wounded, it's closed, and a door that's locked from the inside can't even be opened by the universe. But before we can heal, we must expose. Before we can be free, we must name the pain. Before we can move forward, We need to understand the true origin of the wound that keeps sabotaging your prosperity. So prepare yourself. What comes next won't be comfortable, but it is absolutely necessary. We're about to dig up the deepest roots of this invisible wound that your soul has been carrying. And we'll do it through the eyes of Carl Jung and the sharp edge of truth. Here's the hidden problem and its psychological and philosophical roots. Most people trapped in scarcity believe the problem lies outside of them. They point to a lack of opportunities, an unfair system, absent parents, a difficult childhood, and yes, all of that matters, but it doesn't explain everything. The most paralyzing form of poverty isn't financial, it's spiritual poverty. And that can't be healed with hard work or formulas. It requires something deeper: awareness. Carl Jung understood this more than most. He didn't speak about money, he spoke about psychic integrity. But what few people realize is this: a fragmented soul. A soul divided between who you really are and who you learn to be in order to survive cannot sustain wealth. Because wealth is not just matter, it is identity. And identity is built from emotional roots. If those roots are infected with shame, guilt, or fear, everything you build on top of them will be shaped by those wounds. When you suppressed parts of yourself in order to be liked, to survive, to fit in, you buried your power along with them. And Jung was clear: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Scarcity is not just a circumstance, it's an internal reflection. It's not that you don't have money, it's that on some unconscious level, you don't allow yourself to have it. And here lies the deepest conflict. We'd rather be poor and accepted than rich and rejected. Because from childhood, we were taught that safety equals belonging. And to belong, many of us had to betray ourselves. We had to become what others wanted. We had to be less. We had to be good. And through that process, we learned that shining, standing out, being different was dangerous. Culture reinforced that wound with beliefs like money corrupts, wanting more is greedy, rich people are selfish, suffering makes you more human, being humble means having nothing. These ideas are not harmless, they're like mental viruses, and by repeating them over and over, they embed themselves into your nervous system, into your inner voice, into your way of loving and living. You are not cursed, you are not doomed, but maybe, just maybe, you are carrying a shadow that was never yours to begin with. And now is the time to look at it, not with fear, not with guilt, but with the fierce and loving courage of someone who is ready to reclaim their soul. Carl Jung spoke of something he called herd morality, a collective ethical system not born from individual strength or wisdom, but from the fears and limitations of the powerless. It was a morality designed to keep people small, docile, and within the bounds of sameness. In this system, mediocrity becomes the standard, and anyone who dares to rise above it, who dares to be extraordinary, is met with suspicion, judgment, and alienation. In such a world, excellence itself is treated as a threat. Standing out becomes not an act of courage, but a kind of betrayal. And so, we learn to shrink ourselves, to stay invisible, to conform. The tragedy is that this herd morality doesn't just govern the world around you, it infiltrates your mind. It disguises itself as your own thoughts, your own voice. It becomes that inner whisper that questions every bold step, every moment of self-belief. Who do you think you are? That life isn't for you. You're going to lose everything if you change. It's a voice that sounds like caution, but it's really fear. It sounds like wisdom, but it's really trauma. And worst of all, it doesn't belong to you. It's not your truth. It's your wound speaking. That wound was shaped by experiences where receiving love, attention, or success felt unsafe. It learned that abundance could lead to exposure, that growth could provoke envy or rejection, and that shining brightly could bring isolation or loss. The unconscious absorbed those messages and in turn began to speak through behavior, what Jung called the symbolic language of the psyche. This language doesn't use words. It expresses itself through symptoms, and those symptoms are often misread. Anxiety, even when nothing is wrong. Procrastination, just as you're about to succeed. Self-sabotage at the moment of opportunity. An inability to hold on to joy or achievement. Feeling guilty when good things happen. Feeling like you don't belong when life finally gives you what you've asked for. These reactions don't come from who you are. They come from who you were taught to be. At some point, a part of you was programmed to believe that suffering was the currency for love. That to deserve anything good, you had to earn it through pain. And so, you began to repeat that cycle, without even realizing it. Suffering became your normal. It became your story. But what if that suffering isn't your true nature? What if it's simply the result of a severed connection between you and your authentic self? Because when you've internalized the idea that struggle makes you morally superior or spiritually pure, then anything that feels easy, joyful, or supportive gets rejected. You don't trust it. You dismiss it. You sabotage it. And now you find yourself stuck in a war between what you desire and what you've been conditioned to believe you deserve. This is the true inner conflict. You long for growth, but a part of you fears that growth will make you unsafe. You crave success, but a hidden part of you sees success as a threat. And that part, whether you see it or not, is fiercely loyal, not to your dreams, but to your old identity, to the parents you wanted to please, to the survival mechanisms you created in childhood, to the version of you that learned how to cope by feeling unworthy. Jung called this phenomenon the identification with the wound. You became so fused with your pain, so bonded to your past, that you started to mistake it for your personality. You protect it, guard it, defend it, because you think letting it go would mean losing yourself. But here is the hardest truth of all. You cannot heal what you continue to justify. You cannot evolve if the wound is still the one driving your decisions. And that wound is clever. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't look like destruction. It looks like hesitation, doubt, excuses. The real blockage is not out there in the world. It's not in your circumstances. It's within you. And until you're willing to face it, until you can look directly into the eyes of the shadow, you will keep repeating the same patterns over and over again. And each time, the cost grows higher. Now that you know where the real problem lies, you're being invited to ask a deeper question. What has this wound cost you? Not just in terms of missed opportunities or unfulfilled dreams, but in your ability to truly live. Let's take a closer look at how this wound has silently shaped the way you see yourself, the choices you make, the life you allow yourself to have. Because what you're about to uncover isn't just insightful, it might change everything. You see, there's something far more dangerous than failure, and it's not what you think. It's comfort. It's the quiet comfort of familiar pain. It's the normalization of struggle. When a wound goes unacknowledged long enough, it doesn't go away. It gets integrated. It becomes part of your internal landscape. And when pain becomes normal, it stops feeling like pain. It becomes identity. And identity is powerful. It governs everything. Once you believe that you are your struggle, that you are your fear, that you are your limitation, then everything in your life starts to align with that belief. You don't need to be visibly broken to be deeply stuck. Sometimes, the most dangerous place to be is in a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. A life of routines, obligations, superficial smiles, but no aliveness. That's the most dangerous illusion. The functional life where nothing changes and everything seems okay, but your soul is quietly starving. And the most painful part, it's not that you're being denied abundance, love, or success. It's that you've been conditioned to push it away. The unhealed wound doesn't just block your material blessings. It sabotages your ability to receive anything that expands you. It steals your capacity for joy, intimacy, trust, and growth. And it does this not through dramatic explosions, but through subtle symptoms: hesitation, guilt, disconnection, numbness. These symptoms don't shout. They blend into the background of your existence. They become part of the story you tell yourself about who you are. And eventually, they feel so familiar, so constant, that you stop questioning them. But deep down, something in you knows this isn't how it's meant to be. Life was never supposed to feel like a prison sentence. Your soul was never meant to live in exile from your own power. And the moment you recognize that your inner resistance isn't your enemy, but your oldest wound crying out for your attention, you begin the journey back to yourself. Not the self shaped by fear or survival, but the self that remembers its worth. The self that can receive love without guilt. The self that knows that thriving is not selfish, it's sacred. This is the turning point. Not when you fix the outer world, but when you reclaim your inner one. When you finally see the wound, not as your identity, but as the signal that it's time to come home to who you truly are. First, you become addicted to survival. At first glance, it might seem like you're striving for a better life, pushing yourself to grow, evolve, and improve. But in reality, what's happening deep beneath the surface is that you're trapped in a cycle that never lets you breathe. A cycle where hyperproductivity becomes your identity, where self-demand becomes your compass, and where exhaustion is mistaken for progress. It's a silent trap that disguises itself as ambition, as purpose, as strength. But the truth is, you're not chasing your dreams, you're running from your fears. You see, at some point along your journey, your body learned that being calm was dangerous. It learned that stillness meant vulnerability, that peace was not safety, but exposure. Maybe because in those quiet moments, the things you've buried start to surface. The wounds, the memories, the emptiness. So instead, you run. You run not because you're free, but because you're afraid to stop. And every time you try to rest, anxiety creeps in like an unwelcome visitor, reminding you that silence is a threat, not a refuge. So you keep going. More tasks, more goals, more noise. You stack achievements like armor. You fill your days with deadlines, your nights with obligations, your mind with endless checklists. And yet, with all this movement, there is less and less life. You are everywhere and nowhere at the same time. You are present, but not alive. You are efficient, but not fulfilled. You are productive, but you're not at peace. And your soul, your weary, broken soul, no longer knows how to rest in the quiet. It has forgotten how to simply be. without the pressure to perform, or improve, or prove something. It doesn't know how to exist without the constant hum of urgency, without the background noise of needing to do more, be more, achieve more. The silence becomes unbearable because it reveals the void, and in that void, you feel lost. And yet, it is only in that silence where true prosperity can begin to grow. Because real abundance doesn't arrive in the noise. It doesn't thrive in chaos. True prosperity, deep, lasting, soul-level prosperity, only takes root when your inner world is a place of calm, when the silence inside you is not an enemy, but a home, when you can sit with yourself in stillness and feel whole, when the noise outside no longer dictates your worth, and the silence within no longer feels like a battlefield. Only then can you begin to live, not just survive. Only then can you stop running and start becoming. Not more, but enough. Not faster, but deeper. Not louder, but truer. That's where the real life begins. Second, you lose the ability to receive. This isn't something that happens overnight or something we consciously choose. It's a slow, almost invisible process that unfolds deep within us, often rooted in unresolved pain. People who carry emotional wounds often become givers by nature. They give endlessly. Their love, their time, their energy, even their resources. They pour themselves into others with intensity, with devotion, with a kind of desperation to be needed, to be accepted, to feel worthy. But when the moment comes for them to receive, when someone offers them kindness, generosity, affection, or even recognition, they shrink, they recoil, they feel awkward, unworthy, out of place. Sometimes they deflect the gesture, downplay it, or even sabotage it entirely. And it doesn't just happen in relationships. At work, they might undermine their own progress, hesitate to speak up, or withdraw from opportunities that could elevate them. They unconsciously push away the very things they desire the most: love, success, support. But why? What's truly happening beneath the surface? Deep down, there's a belief, often hidden even from themselves, that receiving is equivalent to taking advantage, that accepting something good means a debt must follow, a punishment must come. They've internalized a dangerous equation, that pleasure must be paid for with pain, that joy is always the prelude to suffering. This emotional programming doesn't come from nowhere. It's the emotional logic of a wounded child. A child who learned early on that love was conditional, that moments of happiness were short-lived, always followed by disappointment, criticism, or harm. That child, still frightened, still vigilant, still hurting, becomes the invisible force steering the adult's life. Every time something good appears, that inner child pulls the brakes. Be careful, it says. Don't trust it. It won't last. You'll get hurt again. This is why healing and self-awareness are essential if you truly want to evolve. You don't just need a vision board or affirmations. You need to rewire your internal system to receive the reality you say you want. Otherwise, you'll unconsciously repel it, not because you don't deserve it, but because a part of you doesn't believe it's safe to hold. And that part will protect you the only way it knows how, by sabotaging every opportunity that threatens to break the illusion of who you think you are. Transformation begins when you stop asking, "Why am I failing?" and start asking, "What part of me still believes this is dangerous?" Until you shift that belief, you will always find a way to escape the very thing you're chasing, because no one runs faster than the person who's afraid of their own potential. 4. You rewrite your reality to justify scarcity. When you've been trapped for too long in a limited version of yourself, your ego starts to create narratives that help you make sense of it. Stories that explain why things aren't working out, why abundance never seems to arrive, and why you feel stuck. The mind clings to these justifications not because they are true, but because they are familiar, and familiarity feels safe even when it's painful. So you start saying things like, "Money isn't everything," or "I'd rather be poor and happy," or "The universe is testing me." You tell yourself, "It's just not my time yet," or "I'm not meant for more." On the surface, these phrases may sound wise or spiritual. They might even hold a grain of truth in certain contexts, but most of the time, they are nothing more than emotional defense mechanisms. Clever ways your subconscious uses to shield your wounds so you don't have to confront them directly. You build this protective wall around your limitations, dressing it up with noble-sounding ideas so you don't have to admit that underneath it all, there's pain. Pain from past failures, rejection, or a sense of unworthiness that's been sitting there, quietly shaping your choices and beliefs. These emotional scars whisper to you every time you try to grow. Stay small. Stay safe. Don't dream too big. Why? Because the moment you truly look within, you risk confronting a truth that might shake the foundation of your identity. The idea that maybe you've been lying to yourself. Maybe you've let fear dictate your life. And that realization can be terrifying. It feels like stepping into the unknown with no map, no guarantee, just vulnerability. It feels like ripping away the only armor you've ever known. But here's what most people don't realize. While looking inward might hurt, living on autopilot hurts more. Waking up every day to a life that doesn't inspire you, that feels like a repetition of yesterday's limitations, that's real suffering. Choosing comfort over growth, denial over truth, wounds over healing. That's what keeps you stuck in a loop of scarcity disguised as humility. And so you keep rewriting your reality. You keep altering the narrative to make your limitations seem acceptable, even noble. You find ways to turn your excuses into philosophies, your doubts into wisdom, your fears into moral values. But deep down, your soul knows the truth. It knows you're meant for more. It knows that those stories are just veils, carefully woven to keep you from remembering your power. You were not born to justify your wounds. You were not meant to settle for a half-lived life. And yet, the longer you repeat these internal scripts, the more real they begin to feel. Scarcity becomes your identity. Lack becomes your comfort zone. And the longer you stay there, the more distant your potential becomes. Not because it's gone, but because you've stopped looking for it. To change your life, you must first change the stories you tell yourself. You must be willing to sit with the discomfort of truth and say, "Yes, I'm scared. Yes, I've hidden from my own power, but I'm done pretending that this cage is my home." Only then can you begin to write a new reality, one rooted not in fear or excuses, but in the fierce courage to become who you were always meant to be. 5. When the soul is broken, your perception of reality begins to shift in subtle but powerful ways. You no longer experience life as it truly is. Instead, you see it through the fractured lens of your inner world. It's not the external world that changes, it's you. And in that transformation, everything becomes distorted. Opportunities that could have been stepping stones to growth now appear as threats. You no longer recognize open doors. Instead, you question them, doubt them, and in many cases, walk away from them out of fear disguised as caution. The success of others, which could inspire or motivate, instead becomes a mirror of your own perceived failures. Rather than celebrating others' achievements, you feel a quiet competition brewing inside you. You compare, you criticize, you shrink. It's not because you're envious. It's because your inner self has not healed enough to recognize that their light does not dim yours. But the broken soul sees light as a limited resource, something to be protected, fought over, or stolen. And when someone extends a hand to help, the brokenness within you might interpret it as manipulation. Genuine gestures of love or support become suspect. You analyze motives, you assume the worst, you build walls that keep the very healing you crave at a distance. Trust in this state feels impossible. You question sincerity. You become hypervigilant, always waiting for the hidden cost, the unspoken condition, the trap beneath the kindness. Even abundance, something inherently expansive and liberating, begins to feel foreign. It doesn't matter if the universe places blessings directly into your hands. Without the capacity to receive, nurture, and trust what arrives, it all slips away like water through your fingers. A broken soul can't recognize abundance as its birthright. Instead, it sees it as luck, as fleeting, or as something meant for someone else. And so, you self-sabotage. You push it away. You convince yourself you're not ready, not worthy, or simply not capable of sustaining it. This is why no matter how much the universe gives you, be it love, money, opportunities, relationships, peace, if your inner structure is not realigned, if your inner world remains fractured and clouded by past wounds, none of it can last. The mind will find ways to doubt it. The heart will struggle to hold it. And the soul will not feel safe enough to rest in it. Healing, then, becomes not a luxury, but a necessity. Because without a deep and conscious reconfiguration of your internal system, your beliefs, your emotions, your patterns, nothing external will feel stable. You will constantly be chasing, grasping, or fearing what you already have. You'll live in a state of survival, even in the presence of abundance. This is one of the most devastating symptoms. You're living beneath your true potential. You settle for what you don't want. You justify a gray, uninspiring life just so you don't make anyone uncomfortable. Carl Jung said that shame is a lie taught to keep us obedient, and as long as you believe that shining is selfish, you'll keep dimming your light so others don't feel uneasy around you. But in that darkness, you're not just hiding, you're losing yourself. These are the invisible consequences of an unhealed wound. They're not punishments, they're reflections. They're the symbolic language of your soul screaming at you, you're not living your truth. That's why you can't sustain abundance. But this isn't where your story ends. Because if you've been able to recognize these consequences, that also means you're capable of changing them. What comes next is the rebellion, a radical path back to yourself, and maybe, for the very first time, toward a real kind of wealth, one that blooms both inside and out. The rebellion begins with liberation. But what if everything you believed was safety was actually a cage? A cage made of sweet but hollow words, of inherited beliefs, of unquestioned fears, of roles you never chose, but play every day as if they were truly yours. Many think that rebellion means breaking everything apart, but it doesn't. Real rebellion starts in silence. It begins the moment you stop repeating what no longer resonates with you. It begins when you consciously decide to see what you once avoided. It begins when you stop being a victim of your past and become the author of your internal reality. Jung reminded us that freedom doesn't come from running away from the darkness. It comes from facing it head on. And that's exactly what you're going to do now. The first act of rebellion is to name the unnameable. Anything you refuse to name controls you. That's why the first real step toward abundance is to name the wound, not from a place of complaint, not from victimhood, but from brutal awareness, the kind that looks in the mirror and says, "Here is my fear. Here is my shame. Here is what I have not yet healed." As long as you deny it, it will have power. As long as you hide it, it will choose for you. The second act of rebellion is breaking free from unconscious loyalty. Many people remain stuck in scarcity out of loyalty to their parents, their community, their past selves, to a misguided idea of humility or spirituality. But Jung reminded us that growing up often means betraying the expectations of those who didn't dare to evolve. It means honoring your lineage by transcending it. Becoming your best version is not a betrayal. It is an evolution. The third act of rebellion is rewriting your inner narrative. Everything you say to yourself becomes your truth. And if your inner voice is soaked in guilt, fear, or unworthiness, your life will mirror exactly that. Real transformation begins when you start speaking to yourself as someone who is worthy, not from arrogance, but from radical compassion for yourself. Phrases like, "I'm not enough. That's not for people like me. I should settle for less." These must be burned to the ground and replaced with new seeds. "I am worthy. I am learning. I can hold what I desire." Not because you've achieved everything already, but because you've finally decided to stop abandoning yourself. The fourth act of rebellion is learning to receive, and this is one of the hardest ones, especially for a wounded soul. Receiving requires vulnerability. It means opening your heart, understanding that pleasure doesn't need to come with pain. It means accepting that life also wants to give to you, not just take from you. Start with the small things. Say thank you for a compliment without deflecting it. Accept help without feeling weak. Celebrate your victories without fearing what others might think. Receiving is a spiritual act. It's a way of telling the universe, "Yes, I'm here. I'm ready." The fifth act of rebellion is reconnecting with your body. Your body holds the emotional memory of every wound. Thinking differently is not enough. You must feel differently too. Walk differently. Breathe slower. Be present in your chest, your back, your belly. Expand your posture. Let the tears flow. Scream if you must. Embrace your shadow physically. Your body is the temple where your soul lives. And if your body is closed, your abundance will be too. The sixth act of rebellion is guarding your energy as if it were gold, because it is. Your attention, your time, your words, these are spiritual currency. If you waste them on complaints, on drama, on comparisons, or on judgments, you'll have no energy left to create what you truly want. A healed soul learns how to say no. No to what drains you. No to what manipulates you. No to what no longer resonates with you. And in that no, a sacred space is born. The space for the yes that changes everything. The seventh act of rebellion is honoring your desire without guilt. Your desire is sacred. It didn't come into this world to be repressed, hidden, or silenced. It came to guide you toward your expansion. Stop believing that to desire is to be selfish. The real selfishness is to deny your soul out of fear of making others uncomfortable. And now you know. Rebellion isn't about chaos. It's about returning home to yourself. It's about breaking the spell of smallness, about opening the gates you once shut, about breathing fully, living loudly, receiving with joy, and walking this earth not as someone broken, but as someone reborn. Carl Jung once said that the individual who dares to be whole, despite being rejected, despite making others uncomfortable, is the one who truly transforms the world. Because they did not come to please, they came to remind others of what they have forgotten about themselves. And that simple truth carries immense power. The path of wholeness is not one of comfort, but of awakening. It is the journey of those who no longer seek validation, who no longer shrink themselves to fit into a mold designed by fear, shame, or conformity. And then something remarkable happens. When you stop begging, you begin to choose. When you stop dimming your light to keep others comfortable, money stops being a source of anxiety. When you choose your soul above all else, life responds, not with fleeting rewards, but with a deep, enduring abundance. Not the kind that comes from surface-level achievement or external applause, but the kind that grows from within, from the roots of your being, from your body, from your emotions, and from an integrated soul that no longer denies any part of itself. Now that the rebellion has begun, this quiet but powerful revolt of the self, there remains only one step, the final revelation, the supreme truth that gives meaning to every chapter of your journey. Prepare yourself, because what comes next has the power to change you forever. The ultimate realization. What if everything you've been seeking out there has always been waiting silently within you? What if prosperity was never meant to be a destination, but a natural result, and not a result of grinding effort, but of deep reconciliation with yourself? For years, you've tried to change your life, but maybe it wasn't your life that needed to change. Maybe it was your relationship with your own wound. That's the uncomfortable truth. Your soul didn't break because of failure. It broke because it was taught that it didn't deserve to receive. And that wound didn't come from weakness. It didn't come from being unworthy. It came from being conditioned to believe that love had to be earned through sacrifice, that life had to hurt in order to have meaning, that dreaming too big was dangerous and reckless. But that programming, that belief system, is not your essence. It's just a mask, an adaptive mechanism you built to survive in an emotionally hostile world. And now that mask is dissolving. And yes, that hurts, but it also liberates. Jung was right. What we deny in ourselves shows up outside as fate. Scarcity is not a punishment. It's a mirror, a reflection of how much you are still denying yourself, of how much you remain bound to a story that no longer defines you, of how many times you've said yes out of fear and no to what you truly deserve. Here is the final revelation. You cannot be rich while remaining loyal to your pain. You cannot be free if your soul is still waiting for permission. You cannot receive the new if you are still clinging to the wounded version of yourself. Because prosperity is not an economic goal. It's a state of openness. It's the energy of someone who no longer needs to hide or pretend or beg for approval. It's the frequency of someone who has embraced themselves fully, with all their shadow, their past, their truth. That is true wealth, to fully inhabit yourself. But such embodiment requires a kind of death, the death of the old narrative, the death of the broken self, the death of the character who has merely survived but never truly lived. And yes, that death is terrifying, because it demands you step out of the familiar, that you walk alone for a while, that you lose approval in order to gain truth. But it is also the most powerful birth you can experience, the birth of the real you. the one who doesn't ask for permission to shine, the one who no longer needs to fit into any structure, the one who chooses the path of the soul over the path of the ego. So what is the final step? It's not doing more. It's not pushing yourself harder. It's not becoming a more productive version of yourself. The final step is remembering who you were before the wound. That child who dreamed without limits, who asked without shame, who laughed without fear of being seen. That part of you still lives. It's still there, waiting for you to return, to look at it with compassion, to whisper, "You no longer need to protect me. I'm ready to live without masks. I'm ready to receive. I'm ready to love. I'm ready to shine without hiding any longer." And when that happens, everything changes. Your energy shifts. Your environment responds. Doors open. Money flows. Not as an end, but as an echo of your deepest truth. Because in the end, what kept you poor was never the lack of resources. It was the separation from yourself. And what will make you rich is not a technique or a formula. It is the reunification of your soul. When your light and your shadow embrace each other, when your past no longer hunts you down, when your heart no longer seeks permission to feel, when you stop running from yourself, life can finally find you. So now, breathe. Feel what you've just remembered. You don't need to understand it all. Just know this: you are not broken. You are awakening. And that is the bravest thing you can do. The rest will come as a result. And maybe, just maybe, it's in the exact moment when you stop running, when you let go of the need to become someone else, when you finally come home to yourself, that abundance at last knows where to find you.